The dust in Red Valley always tasted like old bones and forgotten promises. It clung to boots, beards, and hearts with the same stubborn grit. Market day was no different. Wagons rattled, cattle lowed, sun glared down like it was angry at everyone alive. Folks moved slow, measured, eyes sharp for deals and sharper for trouble. No one ever expected anything good to happen in that square, but they always expected something to happen. Old Harlan Briggs climbed onto the wagon with the confidence of a man who believed the world owed him something. He wore a patched vest over a sunburned chest, his hands thick and cracked like dry creek beds. He grinned like the devil at a church door, yelling loud enough to rattle window panes. "Gather round, folks. Got myself a fine offer today." Men drifted closer. Women pulled their children aside. A dog barked once, then went quiet as if it too sensed the wrong in the air. Taya stood beside the cow, wrists bound with coarse rope. She didn't bow, didn't look afraid. Her dark hair tumbled wild down her back, her eyes flint and thunder all at once. Even with the rope, even covered in dust, she carried a dignity that made the world around her seem smaller, cheaper. But dignity didn't stop cruelty. Harlan yanked the tarp off the cow and flourished his hand at her as though presenting a stage prize. "Best milk cow in the whole damn valley," he shouted. "And look here, buy the cow, you get yourself a working Apache woman for free." The laughter that followed didn't sound joyful. It sounded like something broken. Men elbowed each other. One whistled. Another spat tobacco juice near her feet. A few crossed their arms and looked away, but none stepped forward. Silence was a safe language in Red Valley. Taya didn't flinch, even as the rope rubbed her skin raw, even as her throat worked from thirst, even as humiliation stood beside her like a shadow that didn't leave. Harlan went on, swelling with pride at the attention. "Caught her on my land, tryin' to take what ain't hers. And law says, it was always, law says, when a cruel man needed a reason." But then came the sound that softened every noise in the square, hoof steps. Slow, steady, neither hurried nor hesitant. A rider came through the crowd like the tide, pushing nothing aside yet parting everything. Colt Avery looked like the road had claimed him long ago. Dust clung to his coat and hat, his horse lean enough to show ribs. But nothing about him looked weak. His presence was quiet the way mountains are quiet, solid, undeniable, needing no announcement. He reined in near the wagon and studied the scene. His eyes didn't linger on Harlan, or the crowd, they went straight to Taya. And in that slow, single look, everything shifted. Not because he pitied her, but because he recognized her humanity without having to think about it. The crowd felt it. People shifted, uneasy. Harlan smirked, but his voice lost some of its swagger. "Lookin' to buy, cowboy?" Colt's gaze went from Taya to the rope at her wrists. Then back to Harlan. "She a person," he said softly. "Not a part of a trade." No anger, no threat, just truth spoken plain. A murmur moved through the market like wind through tall grass. Harlan scoffed, louder than before, as if sound alone might restore his control. "She's Apache," he said, like the word meant less than human. "A thief, caught red-handed. She works to repay what she took." Colt didn't blink. "Doesn't justify tying her like livestock." Taya's breath caught, not visibly, just enough that the air felt different around her. Harlan tried laughter again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "What you want me to do? Let her go? You gonna take her home like some lost kitten?" "No." Colt swung down from his horse. Dust rose around his boots. His shadow fell long and steady. "I'll buy her." The world froze. No one in Red Valley expected kindness. And when it appeared, it seemed unnatural, like a river running uphill. Harlan's eyebrows shot up. His greed sparked faster than his pride could object. "She ain't for sale alone. You want her, you take the cow too." Colt didn't even look at the cow. "How much?" Harlan hesitated. There was something unnerving about a man who didn't argue cost when buying compassion. That kind of quiet conviction tended to come from places that scared cruel men. Coins exchanged hands, heavy and final. Colt didn't celebrate, didn't nod in satisfaction. He simply stepped to Taya and pulled a small knife from his belt. Slow, not to spook her, not to make a show. His fingers were steady, gentle even, as he cut the rope free. The fibers loosened and fell like a shackle unclasped. She stayed still, not because she feared him, but because the moment felt unfamiliar. Respect was a strange thing after chains. Colt met her eyes. "You walk, not behind me, beside me." She didn't speak, but something flickered, recognition, shock, the beginning of trust. The cow mooed softly, as if sensing relief in the air. Colt led the horse forward, and Taya followed, not because she was told to, but because the alternative was going back to a world that had just shown its teeth. The crowd parted without argument, not because they respected him, but because a man who stands for something without raising his voice tends to unsettle those who stand for nothing at all. Some watched with guilt, others with resentment, a few with quiet awe. Harlan watched with rage, his pride wounded, his control shattered. The rope marks on Taya's wrists would fade. His humiliation would not. Colt didn't look back. Taya didn't look down. Together they walked away from the market square where cruelty had been routine, and kindness had just drawn breath for the first time in a long while. But Red Valley remembered every slight, and men like Harlan Briggs didn't lose gracefully. Trouble did not end that afternoon. It merely began to follow. The land stretched out in quiet vastness, the kind that made a person feel both small and strangely safe. Red Valley was behind them, a smudge of dust and smoldering tempers, but its shadow still hung in the air. Colt walked beside his horse, reins loose in his hand. Taya followed a few steps away, not trailing, not leading, just walking parallel as though she were figuring out how distance worked now that it wasn't forced on her. The cow plodded calmly behind, content with simply existing, unaware of the human storm that had carried her out of town. The sky was a wide bowl of burning blue. Heat shimmered above the desert brush. Somewhere far off, a hawk called. Taya listened, picking apart the sound like a familiar language. She had grown up learning to read nature more easily than words. The hawk was searching, hungry, alone. She knew that feeling too. They walked in silence long enough that it became almost comfortable. "You thirsty?" Colt finally asked, stopping by a dry wash where mesquite trees offered thin shade. Taya nodded. She didn't waste words. He handed her his canteen without hesitation, no caution, no suspicion. That alone felt unfamiliar. People usually gave her things like she might bite. She drank carefully, not out of fear, but respect for how water mattered here. Colt watched her, not her face, not her lips, but the way she held herself, measuring, cautious, strong. He didn't try to fill the quiet. He seemed to understand that silence could be a kind of shelter. After she finished, she offered the canteen back, but he shook his head. "Keep it." "Long walk still." She hesitated. "I will give it back when we reach where we go." "You don't owe me anything," Colt said. Taya looked at him for a long time. She wasn't used to hearing those words spoken truthfully. Most people gave only to take later. Her eyes narrowed just enough to show she was thinking, not mistrusting, but assessing. "Then why did you do what you did?" she asked. Colt didn't answer immediately. He crouched down to check the ground, then stood again, brushing dust from his hands. "Because I can sleep at night," he said at last. That answer wasn't grand. It wasn't meant to impress. And for that reason, she believed it. They kept moving until the sun dipped low enough that the sky burned gold and violet. Colt's small ranch appeared as a silhouette against the horizon. It wasn't much. A single cabin, wood weathered by years of wind. A lean-to stable, a fenced corral that had seen better days. It was quiet, peaceful, lonely. Home that wasn't trying to be more than it was. Taya stopped a few yards away, studying it carefully, as if the land itself might reveal something about the man who lived on it. She saw repair patches on the roof, done by hand. A split post in the fence, bound together instead of replaced. Nothing here was wasted. Nothing here was extravagant. Everything was cared for with steady hands. Colt didn't invite her inside. He didn't speak at all at first. He simply started tending to the cow, checking hooves, looking for signs of strain, filling a trough with water. He worked the way some people pray, quiet and deliberate. After a moment, he spoke without looking at her. "You can stay here tonight." He took a slow breath. "After that, where you go is your choice." Choice. The word felt heavy, unfamiliar. Taya wasn't sure when she'd last had one. She nodded, but her body remained still, rooted to the ground. She studied him again, this time more directly. "You paid for me," she said. The words weren't an accusation. They were acknowledgement of reality. "I paid to stop something," Colt answered, wiping dust from his hands. "Not to own someone, but the law, the papers. The people will say I belong to you now." She didn't say it with fear. Just clarity. Colt leaned his forearms on the fence rail. The sunset made the dust in the air look like floating embers. "People say a lot of things to make themselves feel right. Doesn't make it true." Taya considered that for a long moment. Freedom sounded simple when spoken out loud. But freedom in the West was dangerous. An unprotected woman wandering alone became prey in more ways than one. After a while, she walked to the trough and washed the dirt and rope-burn dust from her wrists. The water ran red and brown, then clear. Colt didn't stare. He pretended to study a loose hinge on the barn door, giving her privacy that most would not have thought to offer. When she was ready, she approached the cabin. He stepped aside, letting her enter first. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and smoke. A table with 2 rough chairs. A narrow bed against one wall. A stove. A shelf with a few books and a tin of tobacco. Simple. Tidy. Lived in but not cluttered. Taya stood in the center of the room as though deciding what to do with her hands, her legs, her entire presence. She had spent so long being watched, measured, categorized. Now she wasn't sure how to simply exist. Colt lit a lantern. Its glow cast warm light across the room. "I'll sleep outside," he said. No hesitation, no suggestion, just decision. Taya turned to him, eyebrows lifting slightly. She wasn't afraid of him, not exactly, but she knew how men tended to use generosity as currency. "You do not fear me?" she asked. Colt paused. A small, tired smile tugged at his mouth. "No, reckon if you'd wanted to harm me, you'd have done it already." That wasn't a compliment, it was respect. She nodded once. Respect deserved respect. Outside, the evening breeze carried dust and faint nightbird calls. Taya stepped onto the porch and looked across the land as twilight settled. The world felt too big and too quiet all at once. Then she saw it, dust rising on the horizon. Riders. 4. No. 6. Dark silhouettes growing clearer. Harlan Briggs at the head. Her breath caught. Not panicked, but alert. Like a deer hearing brush shift. Colt didn't grab his gun. He stepped down from the porch with slow, controlled movements. Not afraid, not reckless, just present. The riders halted a dozen yards out, hooves stomping dust clouds around them. Harlan's face was red, twisted with humiliation he hadn't swallowed. "You think you can just walk off with what's mine?" he snarled. Taya stepped forward before Colt could speak, her voice sharp enough to cut air. "I am not yours," Harlan sneered, but his eyes flickered, just a moment of uncertainty. Taya was no longer the silent, roped figure in the marketplace. Colt didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. "She's free," he said simply. "Freedom," Harlan spat. "That ain't how the world works. That ain't how things are done." Colt's gaze didn't waver. Maybe things been done wrong. No gun was drawn, no shout was made, but something shifted in the balance of the world in that moment. Harlan tugged his reins sharply and turned his horse. His men followed, though one looked back, a flicker of doubt in his face. Dust swallowed them again. Taya let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Colt finally looked at her, his voice gentle but firm. "You're safe here, and when you're ready, you choose what happens next." Taya didn't reply, but she didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, her future belonged to her.